All right, good evening. Thank you for your patience. Ken at Tortoise Capital. This is the nightly strategy podcast for August 5th, 2020. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Let's see what happens. So this week so far has been created some nice separation from last week. So last week closed at the high of the week. After basically marking time with the previous week. So the last 2 weeks were kind of a sideways, basically a sideways move. But then this move Friday closed very strongly, and it's been really positive so far. So we've had two surges up, and that's very favorable. So it's holding above that the gap that it created from Friday to Monday. So that's significant. You'll notice that the RL10 is nice and strong here. So if we find the 10 days ago was the low of the day, or the low of the 10-day period, I should say, and today's high was the 10-day high. And also notice that it's really the last 5 days of the 10 have really been what's been exceptional. So starting from last Wednesday's low, we've had a really nice move. It's 4% basically from the low all the way up to the 10-day high, which is also the 30-day high. So this is a 4% move, and with the ATR being about 1.15, that makes that almost a 4 ATR move in 5 days. So that's a very strong directional move from bottom to top right there. We will notice that the PSAR is continuing to march its way northward here. And so today's PSAR was 323.45. Tomorrow, projecting forward up the ramp, that should be at right around 324 and some change. So the PSAR is continuing to grind its way north. I'm getting a little concerned that the distance, from the current price all the way down to tomorrow's PSAR, that's farther than I want to give back. Like, I don't want to give back 3%. Like that, if that's 3 ATRs, I don't want to give back 3 ATRs. So if we're holding gains in here, then my stop is much more likely to be something like the 2-day low, and then possibly today's low. If I really want to preserve the gains on that 5-day move, I'm not opposed to having the low of the day, or even the RL10 price right now. That if we think of the 10-period regression line as being the pure fair price, I don't mind picking that as a stop. I could live with the baby dragon. I could live with the upper skin of the dragon. I just don't want to give it all the way back to the PSAR at this point. So those are our support levels. RL10 at 330.66, baby dragon, let's say, at 327.8, upper skin of the dragon, 327.25. The Z1, which was also the previous RL10 peak. So everything north of that is the exceptional gains. That makes these gains of the last 3 days exceptional, and so I really want to hold on. That's why I don't want it to come all the way back to the PSAR, because I think this is the exceptional move, and I don't want to waste that. I want to be a good steward of the opportunity, and because this was a gap that held, I would be happy with the RL10 price, as a hard stop right now until the PSAR or the skin of the dragon or some of these other measures catch up to that level. That 330 actually feels pretty smart. To the upside, we have we're 0.06% away from the high of the day, the 10-day high, and the 30-day high. So we're basically right there. We're right in there. It was a very low volatility day today, a very low range day. If we get just another one of those, that takes us up basically to the Z2. And then we notice that the RL30 extension is actually steeper than the RL10. So that means this trend is really strong and really healthy. And then if it gets above Z2, really the Dragon's all-time peak was 339. And so with price at 332, we're $7 away from that, which is about 7. That's really like 7 ATR up to here. So this is starting to feel really extended, and I want to make sure that I lock this in. This move was not what I had would have predicted. If I was going to pick the most probable, I would not have picked this move as a bet. But fortunately, I'm not predicting. I'm just following price. So that's what the 10-day looks like. It's and the 10-day look back and the current price action. All systems go. And I think my first stop would be here. The RL10 price at 330 and some change. Then I think the next one would be the weekly low, and let's just call that the baby dragon here at 327.85. I think that's otherwise the goodness of that entire move would be gone, and I just don't think you can let all that go. And so RL10 price, baby dragon. If you pick something in the middle, maybe that would be 329.50. So let me just draw those as lines, just to get that locked in. I think RL10 price, the weekly low, and then I would just play some, maybe just split the difference and call that 329.50. Yeah, I think those would be if you had one of those three prices as your stop, then you still get to keep most of this nice move off the bottom. But you get to keep the gains of this week, which was a surprise for me. And I think you've given it enough room to run. All right, let's see what contributed to this good news story today. There's the S&P right in the middle at 6.62%. Diamonds were much better today at 1.34, so twice as good as the S&P, and then the Russell was even better at basically 2%. So that's our three, prime U.S. indexes right there. And then let's take a look at the sectors that were better than the S&P. So there's energy at 1%, emerging markets 1.1, consumer discretionary 1.2, Brazil 1.3, finance and basic materials 1.4, oil exploration 2.1, clean energy 2.6. There's Mexico 3%, silver 3.3. So those are all the sectors that were really working. Let's take a look at the the payoffs in the companies that were better. So there's our triple leveraged tech boys there, and it was a toss up between TQQQ and TECL. They were only marginally. The triple leveraged tech was only a fraction better than the S&P. So that will tell you that techs were not in abundance today as a sector. So there's Coca-Cola, which we highlighted earlier this week, and Nucor Steel. So the materials, the metals, did very well today. Nucor Steel 1%. There's Caterpillar and U.S. Steel. We highlighted both of those earlier this week, 2.6 and 2.66. There's Cliff and Cliff at 3.66, Alcoa at 7.39, and then just crushing it, Devon Energy. Have we been talking about Devon Energy at all? Oh yeah, that's right. Doggone it. Sorry, guys. Screen froze. Let's try that again. I'm going to do a quick recap of the weekly, and then when I produce this, I'm going to cut off that piece again. So I just want to hit the highlights again. We'll see if I can do this faster. I'm going to build 10 seconds of silence in so I can find it easy on the audio. All right, good evening, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital with a review of the daily trading plan and the daily trades for August 5th. So we had a very strong move up today, a nice gap up and a strong finish and follow through. It was a low volatility day, which is actually a good thing because this was just a grinding upward move. We'll see that this was not in tech, though. This was energy, finance, and materials that led the way. So a bit of a broader broadening of the strength today, which is actually a healthy thing. The slope of the RL10 is very strong, and the gains from the 10-day low are 4%, which is almost 4 ATR from the 10-day low to the 10-day high, which was made today. What's especially useful to note is that this retest of the 10-day low 5 days ago now gives us a 4 ATR move in 5 days. That's remarkable. The other thing that's remarkable is that the two sideways weeks of the last 2 weeks have been replaced by a gap up and then continuing to gain. So this gap between this week and last week is solid. So that makes this week's gains of the past 3 days an exceptional and an abnormal gain. So when I'm thinking about where to place my stop in the market, if I'm just trading the market here on this kind of a pattern, I say to myself that I want to preserve some or most of this week's gains. And so I would consider something like a stop either at the low of the day or the RL10 price at like 330.66, or all the way down at the weekly low. But I don't like that one so much because I end up giving back all of this week. So if I pick something right in the middle, not the Goldilocks stop where I'm not too close, not too far away, like at like 329.50, I get to keep something like half of this week's gains and yet give it almost 2 ATR of slack in order to give it room to run. So I wouldn't be offended at all if you took the RL10 price at 330 or 330.50. I just don't think that you can afford to let that price, psychologically come all the way back to tomorrow's PSAR, which would be about 324.25. But we'll notice the PSARs marching northward very nicely, but the gains have been so strong that it's pulling away from the PSAR. Whereas you notice back here, price was pretty snug to the PSAR, but the move of the last 4 days has really caused it to pull away from the PSAR, and that's why I think you got to lock in some of these gains in what I still consider to be a fragile market. The 10-day range, looking from the new 30-day and 10-day high that was made today down to the 10-day low, is 4%, so that's like a 4 ATR. The RL10 has gone summer fall. It's getting ready to roll back into the summer, which would be a very positive move. It's above the baby dragon. The dragon is sloping up. The slope is favorable. The slope of the RL30 is accelerating away from the RL10, and that's a very healthy sign. The next upward targets is really just the Z2, which is about another ATR move. And then from there, it's about 3 more ATRs up to the Dragon's all-time peak at 339.25, and the Z3 is already off the chart. So, yeah, that's possible. I already think this has kind of been improbable, so that's why I want to keep those stops in play. Let's shift to what was working today. So I've highlighted in blue the U.S. indexes. The S&P was up 0.6. The diamonds were double that at 1.34. The Russell small caps even better at 2%. The sectors that were better today: energy at 0.8, emerging markets at 1%, Brazil and consumer discretionary at 1.25-ish, finance and basic materials up 1.38 and 1.46, so that's very good. Oil exploration 2.1, clean energy 2.6, Mexico and silver both up over 3%. And now the companies that really contributed to the gains: Coca-Cola and Nucor Steel up 1.1. U.S. Steel and Caterpillar, which we've been highlighting this week, 2.6, 2.66. And then the real big winners of the day: Kodak 3.4, Cliff Natural Resources 3.6, Alcoa crushing it at 7.4, and then Devon Energy, which we have just been beating a drum on that one, up another 8.5% today. To the downside, what were the sectors that suffered? Well, there's healthcare and technology in the green, but lagging the S&P at 4.6 or 0.46 and 0.37. Wheat and precious metals was in the green, but only up 0.14. That gave back some of the earlier intraday gains. Japan minus 0.7, about 0.07, I should say. Simon Property Group, representing commercial real estate, minus 0.8. Treasuries minus 0.87. There's the triple inverse energy, got smashed, minus 2. And now you'll notice the companies that really suffered today was basically tech from our stack. There's Google and Nvidia underperformed. Apple was in the green, but also underperformed at 0.36. Tesla, Microsoft, Facebook, Intel, all of those down between 0.2 and 0.7. Walmart and Wynn, minus 1.4 and minus 2. And then the big losers today: Virgin Galactic minus 2, and then Nikola Motors, extremely volatile, only good for intraday trading in my view, basically minus 10%. So that's the story of the sectors today. I want to take a look at on a Wednesday midday, just the posture of the 4 weekly market samples that we've been concerned with. So this is the S&P, and now this week is very favorable because we had seen it testing between Z0 and the Bollinger Band mean weekly, and then the Z1. So we treated that as a trading range, and we were interested to see what's up. Well, it was able to break through, and so far so good. That's very strong. And then if we just notice all the way back here, it's within range of that all-time high around 340. So we're not that far off. The weekly move that I want to preserve, and this is what that looks like now. On this chart, is basically just underneath the weekly low. So like that, I would just call that right here on a weekly. And then you saw using the daily charts, I was more like 330. So I want to hold that. I don't want to let it come all the way back to fair value, and certainly not to the Bollinger Band mean. This feels very fragile to me. but I have to be long because that's where price is pulling. The treasuries, on the other hand, which have been having a very nice move. That's the move there, and now this is starting to just retrace somewhat. Yeah. So I would take the weekly low at 169 as the most aggressive stop on the treasuries. So if you're trying to lock in those gains, you might be looking at, say, the weekly low, skin of the dragon, spine of the dragon. Certainly not letting it past the dragon all the way, and certainly not to the PSAR. So, and depending on your risk tolerance and depending on where your entry was, any one of those might meet your needs. For me, it would be one of these top two. It's either 169 or 168. I'm not going to let it get further south than that. To the upside, if this can break out, then you'll notice that it's basically free and clear all the way to the if it breaks that RL30 or makes a new weekly high, then it's smooth sailing all the way to Z2. So there's a reason to see some upside there. I don't think I would be short this until probably the break of the dragon, and then I could see that testing here all the way down to fair value. I think that's how I'd play that. Brazil, on the other hand, has underperformed both of those assets. Here was a trading range. It broke out of that and gave from that doji and gave us this. Now it has not had the same kind of follow through. I think it's just the economic reality of the COVID, and they're one of the hardest hit countries. So I would treat that as the yellow zone. I would pick up a short swing. I think if it breaks this weekly low, I think I would be aggressive on that one, shooting for the PSAR and maybe the Z1, and then all the way down here. So I think that's the way I would play that. And then I think you would have to be long if it broke out above the 2-week high. And then you're playing back to fair value. And then depending, in that white zone, if you're not ready to get long, you want to see the confirmation. To me, you might as well get long if it breaks out above this. I mean, you might as well get long there. Why not? If it rejects, you know how to get out of that. You're not going to take a great long. That way you have absolute clarity about, buy, hold, or sell. Technology. So that had this horrible sell-off. It had the recovery, first leg of the recovery to there. Second leg up right to there. And now it's starting the third leg up. And there's, no resistance overhead. And you'll notice all this price action that's in here, 100% of it is hitting the asking price. So people are buying that at whatever it's on sale for. They're not haggling. They're just buying tech right now. So when we think about those four regions, or those four representative samples of the market, we'd have to say that tech. God damn it! Come on. Yeah, XLK is the clear winner. I think SPY is starting to distinguish its. Come on, Ken. SPY. I think I'd say TLT, and then EWZ in terms of that stack. That's the priorities of with tech is the clear winner. The S&P is outperforming EWZ. Treasuries are starting to fail a little bit as the S&P starts to crank north. I think that's some discretionary money coming out of the gains in treasuries and rolling into the S&P and tech. And Brazil is just its own case. It's had a nice run up, but I don't know how much more upside there is there, unless somebody has some good news on COVID that I haven't seen. So I think that's how I would play that. All right. Let's take a look at the trade offerings from the gang today. All right. Again, if you put your names on here, then I can remember who posted these. I'm gonna guess wrong, so I'm not even gonna guess. This is a reasonable entry in U down, and I'm not offended by this exit, although I think it should be higher. The in this case, he took the PSAR instead of the Wu Wei, but in either case, moving it to here. I wonder if I can get a pointer on this thing. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. So if you were using the Wu Wei exit, you'd have stayed down here, and then right about this point when it was like 1, 2, 3 dots above the entry, your stop would have been here, and then moved almost immediately to get hit right here. You might also have just elected to use a sniper instead of 1, 2, 3 exit here, but the PSAR works just fine, and so there's a fractional gain. This is a great reentry. He's using the PSAR again. The Wu Wei exit would be right about here, and then accelerate to right about here, and then a sniper exit. You just don't get any better than trade number 2. That's very well done. So it gets net positive. That's well done. Yeah, Robert. That's thank you. So good work on that one. This one can't really see that well. See if that shows better in here. Oh. It's a little fuzzy on the screen, but I think you can see the first one. The first one gets long and then ends up scratching. Then a beautiful collapsing dragon for 1, 2, 3.5 gains. I think that you could consider a second entry if you take a look here below the original support levels here. Then this next leg down after you had one wrist box in hand, that's a logical place for a second entry, or if it crosses the VWAP, if that's the VWAP, that there's a way to get an extra position in there. This is a good measured move, 0.3R, a good scratch, another good scratch, nothing wrong with that, and then getting paid here for 2R on the downside. So very nicely done getting what was available. Here's DIA. Looks like a fractional loss and a scratch, then a nice 3R gain. This is a candidate where the highlighter is for a possible second entry when it clears the previous hump. So now what you had was you had a low, a higher low, a higher low, and then this, this entry followed by a second entry right there. I think you get maybe squeeze a little more out of there. This is a good scratch. Fractional loss, fractional gain, a bunch of mucking around. So here's, this is nicely done. 4.25R on this one. So you get the collapsing dragon and a second position when it breaks the support level. So that's just nice as can be. And then a great one here. So I don't know if that's one too many trades in the SQC. Maybe it is. But as long as you don't stay wrong too long, that's looks like Van Miller's. That's some good work in there. That looks like so +3 +4.25 +1.5 is 8, almost 8 3/4, and then minus probably a couple R in here. So that's like a 6R day in DIA. Good work. Pavel. He makes the observation, I don't disagree, that if he's using the Wu Wei, I don't know, you might have taken that exit anyway. He was thinking that, well, if he doesn't take that exit, then he's going to get paid even better up here. But I don't mind that exit. I like the reentry. I think I would have liked the reentry a little sooner, like in this bar. And this is the idea where the that PSAR, that trailing PSAR, actually starting to feel pretty smart. This is either a reentry or, so I think you probably exited here and then a reentry. That's a good reentry. Another exit in here would have been consistent. So there's a chance in here to squeeze a little bit out. We got to be concerned about not getting this one though. There's a collapsing dragon and a second collapsing dragon in there that we want. All right, let's see. So we have, one of the things, once you get out of the kata and into the a little bit more discretion, even though we have a harsh winter and into the spring, you you either got to buy that right here, but waiting for this one, you've already got prices gotten to the Bollinger Band mean and it's starting to decay. So buying it as it's making, as it's giving retracement, I don't know if I like that. Like I'd rather see you get the resumption when this turns into the summer. So you end up getting the same entry if you take it here instead of here. But and then on the Wu Wei exit, you don't lose as much because you probably end up, if you take this one where you should, you end up making a fraction, or you end up scratching. So instead of losing 1.2, this ends up being probably more of a scratch. Then here's the next trade that's in alignment with the leg 1, 2, and 3. Then you have 2 kind of failed attempts that only gets back to the previous support level. Then this should be, I want you looking for those kinds of signs. Here is a potential SSC. This is the second leg up. This is more of an emerging dragon, I would say. If you're going to take this one, then you might as well take it in that little niche right there in that elbow. And so this would end up being a scratch or maybe even a fractional gain instead of a -1. Then you got this nice long sideways quiet channel, all of which is happening right here where the bend of the dragon was and the support level. And then that collapsing dragon, I'd like to see you get in here, the Z3 excursion, if you will, instead of the given an extra one. So that would make that about 2.2 instead of 1.6. But still, that's a good catch. I like the re-entry here and the fractional. And then when this collapses, there's opportunities. So some good learning using the kata. So this is on, I guess this is Dow Chemical. Notice not as much trading volume, so it's a little bit trickier to play these lesser liquid companies. But that's a nice catch. Then there's a re-entry either here or here. But I like at least the scratch. Then we notice the Z3 pinch possibility. So collecting 2.2, by no means exhausting all the opportunities that were in there, but I really like the tight risk management and control in there. And if you can squeeze 2.2 out of this and just recognize what some of the other opportunities were, and it will be even better. All right, so here is, this is Brazil. That's kind of I'm not sure where that entry is and why. I like the point, I guess. I'm not sure why that's our entry. And I'm not sure why that's the exit, unless your exit was all the way over here. So that, I'm not sure that chart markup is all that clear. Because I don't see unless you just wanted to lock in 2R, then I could see that. It had 3 bars, and then if that doesn't fail, then there's a potential re-entry in here. you've got the color codes going on the bar on the RL10, so you can shrink this MACD histogram and give yourself a little more room to see what's going on instead of looking through a straw here. This is a great re-entry and a nice capture. This was a reasonable effort to get short, but I think you got to exit that a couple bars sooner instead of waiting that long. That's a good stop and reverse possibly here. And then by this time, there's probably some discouragement, and even more discouragement when we miss the big move of the day. Because if you got 2R out of this half move, there was probably 4R in a second position right here. So forgive yourself for the trading that you do, and get used to this is the feeling of building resilience, right? You say, oh, okay, this is what I ask the girls to do when we do our high intensity interval training. Is, we do things that are athletically challenging with skills, and then I put them through it until it takes them right up to the edge of their skill, and then the skill starts breaking down. And then in that moment, I just ask them, really do one more play with skill, add one more touch with skill, so that you can start building chains. So you can start doing 3 or 4 or 5 tricks, or 3 or 4 or 5 trades in a row. So enough on that one. So this is just what it means to get in the weight room and build cardio. That's what you're doing. So keep up the fire. I think it was maybe Robert at using the TC 2000 bundle, finding some potential movers that had. We're having breakouts in here on the NDX 1 minute and 3 minute. It was breaking out, and it had already broken out on the 10-day. So DBA was showing some possibilities of early moving. But then notice that early in the day, the things that were starting off doing really well, Devon Energy, oil, silver, all finished very well. So getting those movers early is a good thing. And so, yeah, it started moving early and often. And let's see. This is all right. So some dailies. So this is when I'm looking at this trade frame for agriculture. So commodities, you have to play them with an extra degree of freedom, and by that I mean there's an extra variable in there that you must always keep in mind. This is going to be true with silver and oil. And that is that these prices are connected to actual real things that are raw materials that are used in the production of goods. And so there is more reality underlying that price than there is on something that is speculative like Virgin Galactic, which is really all about people's perceptions about the possibilities of the future, right? So what we're noticing here is an exceptionally strong move that is already 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20, probably 20 days in a row of solid gains. And so even though all the slopes of all the indicators are up, we almost got we have a 1 and a 2, and tomorrow this would be a 1, 2, 3 exit. So the point I want to make here is that not only, I'm interested in this as a continuation to the upside, but I'm mindful that this is already an excursion out to Z2, and there's a lot of profit already baked into the cake, and everybody that's made money on the way up has an has a interest in selling to lock in gains. If there's any kind of weakness in this at all going forward, we got to be mindful of that one. So that daily frame, using that yellow box, if like I would even consider being short at around 1405 ish, with a play back here to the PSAR. Yeah, the DBA on the weekly, we have had the first, strong move out of a almost a 3-month consolidation zone, enough to flip a PSAR. So, if it gets back above, say 1415, or it even makes a new high at 1420, and you're playing it to 1460, yeah, I think the longer term swing trade is still there. So this is really has become a critical state, and so it's of great interest. Old DBA right there, buying food. Now, if that Three Gorges Dam breaks, the price of this will go up when that stuff is taken off the production line. Okay, so good work. Way to use the room to get some feedback. Good work in there. All right, let me get let's jump to the daily, and I'm going to finish up with some coffee talk today too. So. Okay, so the daily report now for the 5th. So still strong bullish normal. Everything strongly overbought, no surprise. Almost 6% above the swing or the sideways boundary, which is at 200-day moving average plus 2%. So, and now the ADX has finally come back above 15. So anytime it drops below 15, that's exceptionally untrending. And then when it comes back above 15, then our job is to figure out what is it that has now made this become trending and what's leading the way. And it looks like tech. Right? And then ATR is getting pretty quiet at 1.09. You can remember 3 or 4 weeks ago, that was up at 2.4%. So the volatility is getting crushed out of this market as people are getting a little more tentative and playing a little closer to the vest. You can see that being reflected in the risk Z starting to roll over. Again, that's warning us as it gets into the fall of the potential for sharp adverse volatility moves. Especially the last 5 days have been a 4 ATR move up in 5 days. And that's an abnormally good move. Just saying. No signals on channeling and overreaction. The winners, Diamonds, Healthcare, Nike, Home Depot. There's Home Depot again. 10-day laggards, the Max Payne, Intel, Chevron. Travelers had a nice day today, and still more room for that to go. Intel, General Electric of interest. Handful of dojis. Nothing tests out on the auto framer because everything is so close to their 10-day high. There's just no wiggle room to get the reward to risk ratio you want to see. Big winners today, Mexico, metals and mining, no surprise there, silver. Oop, did I skip the Dow? Yeah, skip the Dow, sorry. Half a dozen dojis, some great risk to reward profiles in here. Intel 10.3, Travelers 3.8, Coke 3.5 to 1. Still some goodness there. Meanwhile, Apple's just crushing it on every dimension. And Disney was a percent winner today and is outperforming 1 day, 10 day, and 1 month. So maybe that's a turnaround sign. Probably worth trading, worth framing. Silver, gold, and Procter, and Apple. Big stretches. Intel and GE still the two noticeable laggards in the Dow. Merck and Pfizer both getting pinched. So that would lead me to go take a look at XLV for the healthcare sector more broadly. I like that Microsoft and Apple have the lack of volatility really makes me want to look at them for the upside, even more. The auto framer standard trading data for you there. The daily squeezes, these are the ones that if they break out of today's trading range have the best reward to risk ratio if it just moves an average distance. I like that the S&P is in that condition. There's your healthcare and tech and Home Depot. And even Traveler is still a good one today. So lots of goodies to choose from. There's diamonds and consumer discretionary and Coke. Boy, everything I love is on that list today. And then this gives you all of the framing data over here for mechanical entries and the amount of risk to take. Those symbols that are in the summer are the ones that are really starting to stretch away from their competitors. Tech, energy, metals and mining, small caps. These laggards really suffering. Bright green are the ones that are dominating on the short-term breakout plays. Disney is just exceptional today. And then look at this is just everything coming up roses. The only things that aren't the defensive plays, utilities and treasury. So if you ever think that if you had an opinion that you were going to have to play defense, you're getting a chance to buy some defensive sectors on sale. Such as real estate and healthcare. That's everything I want to cover from the daily report. I'm going to save the coffee talk till later. I want to give you some time to prep. No, I'm going to suck it up and give it to you. Here we go. We're only an hour into this. I was letting my suffering get in the way. It's easier to do it than to not do it. So the first thing I want to cover is this idea of I came up in the chat room today with talking with Neil. And Neil is in the process of going from kata to personalized rule set. Come on, Ken. All right, so let's see what we got here. So in the chat room, Neil got us started off. He had some thoughts on how to adapt the his exit management rules to more reflect what it was that he was seeing, some opportunities that he was seeing, and he was looking strongly at the that trailing PSAR stop, and I think there's gold in there. And so as he started verbalizing some of the ideas that were running through his head, I wanted to make sure that he didn't just start noodling for noodle's sake because it feels fun. No noodling. So we'll just make that as a rule. No noodling around. So if we're going to work, let's work. And so my recommendation was to consider a set of questions. Start by defining the purpose of the stop rule adjustment. So begin with the end in mind. I'm going to do this work because of reasons. What's the reason? What's the purpose? So we want purposeful action. Um, to refine that, what are you trying to achieve? And how would you know that that's an improvement? So that's really another way of saying define what the goal is and measurable to extend that. How good is good enough in a measurable way, which in other words, how would you know when you're successful? So you can imagine that now what he's got is, he's trying to climb that hill from good to what? Perfect? Or is it just better? If it's just better, is this good enough? Or is that good enough? Is this good enough? Is that good enough? So how do I know? Because if I don't have some kind of benchmark ahead of time, then whatever I'm feeling, whatever the feels are, I might let that convince me to say, oh, that's all there is and there ain't no more. I'm letting my feelings in the moment decide when to stop, and that's not good. That's like using how you feel as a function of the results to decide if that was a good trade or not. So we don't want that. So how would you know when you're successful? And what would satisfy you? So there's two things that you got to have on that. You got to have something like uh, some kind of measuring system and a way to characterize what is good enough for you or what satisfies you. A way to think about that is just as a routine, just say good, better, and best. So maybe I just start with what's the minimum amount that I could move up this stack and say, hey, if I got that far, I don't really know how much further I could go or what else is out there and all that. But if I could just get that, I'd already be happy because I got a piece. That's almost like the no lose plus dinner for two moment, if you think about it in that term. So maybe that's good. So maybe this is just meh. maybe that used to be good, but no, it's no longer good enough. Maybe it's just meh. So if I can get this far and call that good, and then maybe this might be, hey, this is better, because now that's another couple chunks better. That would really be good. And maybe I'm closer. Once I get past this one, I'm really on my way. So, and then maybe best might be the same. If everything just happened better than I could even, I would be embarrassed to want to get that much better, you know. But I'll aim for it anyway. See, I don't deserve it, and I can't. But yeah. So a system of good, better, best allows you now to think about three levels of performance. Something like the good enough, and maybe if this was a histogram, that might be our three regions: here, here, and here. Three possible scoops: good, better, best. Now let's take a look at some motivation and say, well, why is the status quo not good enough? Maybe it was good enough for a while, but now some new things have come to light. It says, hey, what have you observed as evidence that more is possible, and at what cost? The fact that you've been observing other opportunities that maybe you're not getting, maybe that's why we would say, well, now the status quo is no longer good enough. And those two things are probably taken together. So why is this a value proposition worth investing time and effort in? Of all the things that I could do to improve my reward to risk ratios, why is this the one that looks like the thing to do? That's the same position you're in as a trader when you say, hey, I've got 5 things that all meet my criteria for framing, but I really only have time to frame 3 of them. Well, why did you pick the 3 that you picked? Probably as a function of a better reward to risk ratio or some other criteria. So I'll just say, Neil, well, why is this one fiddling with that PSAR trailing stop? Why is this the one that's worth doing it? So if you focus on your process improvement with those guidelines in green, then you're going to get better at this. You're going to be more efficient, and you're going to approach it in a business-like way because you already defined the terms of measurement and the management structure and what to aim for. And you have clear expectations. This thing's going to get done, and I'm expecting to see some performance. So you're not going into this with just, let me fiddle around and see what happens and fritter away time and money and effort and attention when there's plenty of things that we could be working on. So let's treat work with respect and work with these kinds of focusing questions. That's some just free coaching for you there. And then, oh, by the way, his idea about looking at the descending PSAR pattern as a way to trigger the entry sooner. Yeah, there's gold in that mine. Because remember what we had in our pattern was we had some kind of harsh winter that has reversed, that crossed the baby dragon. The big fat dragon's coming down. The RL10 turned to spring. Spring is going to turn to summer, and off that thing goes. And so a lot of times you get that move out of there is sharp. And while we're waiting for the PSAR finally to flip, remember, see, this thing doesn't work until the PSAR dots, which are coming down here. Now it flips. And then if this thing works, it's going to start looking like that. And so what he's observing is the same things others among us, that this move from here, the PSAR flip from there to there, that doesn't happen until the price bar, closed. So if that happened, and now it opened here, we're probably, all of us, either buying it right here, or we're waiting for it. You may be waiting for it to clear and buying it here. But what we've been noticing is, as this PSAR comes down in an orderly fashion, that if we just at PSAR -1 and had that line right there, then if we get this explosive move off the bottom, remember, because price might have been doing this kind of crap. And now suddenly you get this great big bold move, which it has to close before this PSAR dot will flip from here all the way down to here. So if we're trying to, so what Neil has noticed is that a lot of times when you see this kind of orderly turn, that if you had this entry here, you'd be happier here. And you'll notice that your risk box is now from here to here instead of from here to here. So you're getting a better R multiple because your risk box is smaller, and you're getting the benefit of this gain by entering earlier. So he's looking at this as an idea with some questions, and he's got to do some work, and this is all very fuzzy. And so in order to stay focused, those questions in green will make you treat this like a work project and a science project, and put you on a deadline and get it done, and then measure it to quickly find out, well, just is there any gold in that mine? I think there is. Neil then observed, hey, it makes him glad he has a notebook to be able to write down those good ideas for later in-depth analysis. And then my note was, yeah, that's why I keep 20 or so 5x8 cards. Each one of them is a project that has a collection of notes, and they're on my little magnetic bulletin board next to me. And then I'm using those to record things for projects and to do things. And I have another set of sketches that, as I'm starting to pull together things, like the writing process flashcard I'm about to show you, that's how I get all that noisy talk out of my head. And so, for example, this little text diagram is that list of questions in the green is already going into a flashcard that I'm drawing that shows those as a standard set of focusing questions in order to be ruthlessly efficient in framing out your improvement project. And I'm going to use that flashcard in my doctoral teaching courses for my organizational development students, in the collaboration that I'm doing with University of Chicago Business School and the use of mind maps. Like, this is going to be a visual mind map for them. In the true storytelling workshops that I'm running and a part of, so that people can, instead of just enjoying the moment of true storytelling and the fellowship, they're actually doing things that make a difference. And then I'm using this note sheet in tonight's podcast. I mean, why not? So I'm trying to be very efficient with that. And the nice thing is I get those questions out of my head onto a standard practice, and then it could become an artifact. The important thing is that it's out of my head and into the world, And that's what gives me a little bit of peace and quiet, the endless chatter of the monkey with all those questions and ideas in my head. But now that I've got them written down, I can relax a little bit because I'm not going to forget them because I wrote them down. So not only is that a good set of questions, just this whole technique of using mind maps and 5x8 cards and project notes and a master poster board, then that master poster board is simply the possible projects. And then I can use my uh, uh, my Kaizen, my limiting my work in project board, the Kanban board, to minimize the work in progress, so that when I'm working in furious burst activity, I can burst on the one or two things that are the most high priorities. And then if I notice some other idea that's trying to interrupt me, I just get it out of my head by quickly putting it on one of those other 5x8 so I don't forget it, and then back to work. And I use Pomodoro technique to burst for 5, 6, 7 minutes at a time. Take a quick break, another 5 to 10 minutes. After 20 or 30 minutes, get up and throw the kettlebell around a little bit. So this process of getting all these ideas out of my head is a technique. And what I find is, if I don't write it down in a productive, efficiently reliable, and recallable way, it's just going to nag me until I finally do something about that, and it interferes with the other things I want to work on. Or I'm going to forget about it, and then I feel guilty when later on down the road I remember, oh yeah, I had that idea and I didn't write it down and didn't do something with it, and then I get to feel guilty for neglecting it, and then that interferes with good production. So all of those thoughts and words and ideas is what the inside of my head sounds like all the time. Now, that's just monkey chatter in my head. And now, with respect to trading, if I don't have a systematic way of documenting these research ideas and putting them into practice, then all those things are just in my head. And as I'm trying to just execute a kata or execute a trade, all of those monkey noises are in there trying to interfere because it hasn't been paid attention to yet. He wants me to investigate now because he sees that happening on the chart. Well, that's not what I want to experiment. I'm just trying to trade that according to the rules. So when I get that monkey chatter out of my head onto a sketch pad, then I can relax because it's out of my head and the monkey's satisfied that, hey, you put it on a card and he's going to do something with it. Then it's there to be managed. Then when I don't know what to do, or I just want to take a break, or I'm swinging the kettlebell, I can just look at the broad board of targets and projects, say, yeah, I feel like working on this, I feel like working on that. So when I feel like working on it, I work on it. And when I feel like working on it, I put it back on what's the next thing I feel like working on? Something. I don't feel like working on anything? Okay, take a rest. Go work out. Tired of working out? Well, then go to work. Or take a nap. Or take a walk. Or walk the dogs. But all of those now are ways that I can go through this little mantra. Clear the deck. That's, clearing my head. Clear the deck by writing it down so that you can then lock it in and then make a connection that persists. So when I make my little cards, things that I want to connect that to or things that it reminds me of, I have spaces there on that Cornell note-taking sheet so that when I consult that note sheet, I will be reminded of all the other things that this is connected to. And then you can move on to the next task. So I have stacks of flashcards. Scott asked me, how do I keep all my notes organized? I find the most I've been struggling with this and enjoying this for 30 years. And I'll tell you just what works best for me is 5x8 cards, like a deck of playing cards. And I just keep them on a ring or in a stack or in little groups. by project or a little folder, and I like having them loose so that I can do something with them. I've tried where I just 3-hole punch them and put them in a notebook and carry them around, and that works okay too. But I kind of like having just a free floating stack held together by an alligator clip or a rubber band, because that's what I used to do when I was an infantryman. I had 3x5 cards because I didn't have as many ideas. And I just like having a rubber band or a little, like a black alligator clip. You just pull those out and then use it while I needed it, and then periodically transcribe them into something else. What I like to do with those is I always scan them, and then I name and number them and put them in one giant flashcard folder, and then periodically dump all those flashcards into one giant PowerPoint slide deck. Like the one that I'm building for the hybrid workshop of the last 4 months has about 150 flashcards in it. So I just chunk them all inside there. Now I gave Neil that Zettelkasten, Zettelkasten. That's a German word for it's called a slip box. It's how to make permanent notes that show connections, and so that you can recall it with like an index number and little keywords. If you take a look at the modified Cornell note sheet, you'll see that there's that all of the key concepts that are on the left-hand side column, those are all keywords. Now, there's a kid named Tiago Forte, Tiagoforte, who has some piece of software that a lot of folks are experimenting with to do this Zettelkasten notes, but in a digital way. It's almost like building a wiki with automatic keywords that are making connections for you. And the insight from these books on Zettelkasten, which has been around for 100 years. It was pioneered by a German sociologist who was prodigious in the number of books that he wrote. Luskin is his name. He wrote like 70 or 80 books and about 500 refereed papers. And all he ever did was work on whatever was interesting and then made these standalone notes with references and put them all in one big box. And then he was able to build this associative concept maps. Well, that little approach now is what gets me to this little mind map I want to share with you. So I shared this one with the guys as a mind map for how to take notes, and I just shared this with all my students and my peers to say, hey, this is my writing process. I have a reputation for writing a lot and writing well inside our building. I don't think I'm all that good, but I'm pretty good. And so this is the process of how I get to whatever it is that I'm working on that I find important, right? So over here on the left-hand side, I'm talking about this section over here. So on this section, there's all this stuff floating around in my head. Fragments, facts, partial pieces. Every one of these little dots is a thing. That might be a note sheet or 5x8 card or a concept. And these little dots are things that are starting to connect these things possibly together. And then when I'm just kind of in broad scanning mode, and I'm just looking at all these things floating around in somewhat of a loose connection, all of a sudden, it's like lightning will strike. And then I notice this green line. I see a theme has emerged that now there's like, those 5 or 6 notes all pulled together are really one thing that looks like a concept. And so I've got that concept built that has all these note pieces pulled together. Well, that's going to be a really nice flashcard, a process card. Like if you think about the ones that you may have seen me do with the Walking Man and the Shingo model, and I drew one for you just a little while ago. The supported spring crossing was a concept map. Has a lot of things going on. Oh, this mind map that I'm drawing on right now is a concept map. It's the concept map for my writing process. I'm pulling a lot of ideas together here. And the point I make to my guys is when you're trying to figure out what to write on, it's never a blank page because you have all of this stuff over here going on, either in your head, and that's why your head is a busy, confused place, or you've exported it into some kind of systematic mind map collection, concept map, word map, mental model database. And so now when I'm just scanning and from the outside, from all of these different perspectives, I might say, hey, of all those things that I know, I get when I look at it from this perspective or that one or this one, I get different angles on it. I look at it as a trader, or I look at it as a teacher, or I look at it as a writer, or a whatever I am. When you start looking at this swirling mass of little elephants in there, suddenly, you know, that green theme jumps together, and now that feels like something that I can put together. Well, that little thing that I put together is a next higher order of concept model or process. And that might be any number of these things. So I have some stack of projects that I'm working on. And so I got this whole set of forming ideas. It's more than just individual collections of facts. And, these are connected and bound together, and there's something building out of here. So I'm now building these mind maps all the time, these themes and mind maps. So I am actually using a combination of writing and drawing, like I have on here, combination of words, phrases, pictures, arrows. I use those intermediate writing and drawings to make sense out of all those loosely connected things in my head. So I use writing and drawing to make themes and mind maps. And so this concept model that I'm just showing you in my writing process is an example of one of those things where I've pulled together a bunch of little pieces. And then when I make those notes, I might be those themes and concepts emerge, and in those notes I make it a point to say, hey, this idea that I took a note on over here, I think it already is connecting to this one and maybe that one. And then when I look at this one, I said, oh yeah, and that one was pointing to this one. So now it starts building up this chain of connectivity, and that's where these concepts and themes emerge from. So now when I'm deciding what I want to work on, what I want to write about something, I want to take this set, which is the one that's most important at that moment, based on whatever perspective. So maybe that is the one that I pick. And then I start building this into a project. And then the output of this might be a story, a video, a slide, a paper, an article, a practical exercise, or whatever it's going to be. And then I'll go through that and think, now that I have this project, what's the purpose of this thing? Think about the questions that I just asked Neil to think about. What are you trying to do? What's the purpose of it? And then what's the story behind this concept? Illustrate it with something practical and useful. And then what's the structure of it, the architecture of the story or the process or the flow chart or the picture of the ecosystem? What's the story structure look like? What kind of voice am I using? Persuasive, informative, directive, encouraging, creative? Who is the audience that's going to benefit from it? And what are their needs? And so how can I shape all of these? So if I always know who my audience is and what their needs are, when I come to take a look at this set of stuff floating around in my head, then I'm actually looking for things that can combine and collect in order to come over here and do something good for the audience that I'm trying to create value for. And oh yeah, that's my purpose, is to be of service to others. So it starts and ends with that purpose, be of service to others. So that now gives me a very particular perspective to adopt every time that I'm looking in to this swirling melee of my mind. So this might be service to my trading audience, my military officers, my soccer players, my doctoral students, my friends, whatever it may be, the true storytellers. So it's always in service to others and knowing what their needs are, because I ask them and they tell me, and the questions that you ask me give me, each one of those blue dots might be a particular question that I'm trying to answer. So as I come over here and I start looking around through the things that I know or have written down or thought about, there may be some theme that comes to, that collection of things may actually may be useful to that audience. And then I can coalesce that into a storyboard or with some concepts, and then that becomes a story with structure, voice, audience, and purpose. And so I am never starting with a blank page. There's always some prompt on there that's acting as a pull forward mechanism. And so as I'm selecting out of the stack of things to work on, what seems to be the one that feels most important right now? And then I use more writing to turn this, what starts as a verbal story and a storyboard, into a structured article. And then I can use that writing to focus and then write with a purpose. Then when I actually am writing things, this unfolds very, very nicely. So I use that model to write in about 20 minutes today, a 4-page memo to our new commanding general. About a week ago, he asked us, hey, what have you done in the last 4 weeks to be a better teacher and a better professional? And so a lot of guys looked at that and said, oh, this is a compliance inspection. He wants to see who's been naughty and who's been nice. I just said, screw that. I'm not going to I consider that to be a useless activity. So I said, how can I repurpose it and say, oh, I know. I've got some new students and some new teaching partners coming into the building, and I have to write an introduction to them about me anyhow. So I just decided to write the memo to the commanding general, and in a way that it would communicate my expectations to my students and to give them background information on who I am and how I operate. So it gives them like an operating manual to Dr. Long. So in the opening paragraph to him, I told him, I said, sir, the purpose of this essay that you asked me to write for you, I repurposed it. This is an essay introducing me to my students. And it answers your question because I tell them what it was I was working on for the last 4 months, so that if they're interested in any of that stuff, then they can use me as a resource, but they can at least figure out who I am and how I work and what I do. So I was able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But I told him that up front because I wanted him to understand that the only thing I care about, number one, is making the students' educational experience better. I'm going to do what he told me to do. I'm going to write a memo, but I'm going to shift the purpose into something that I find valuable, which is connected to my purpose, which is to help my students become better. Now, and then I told him, I trust your judgment to use this however you want. I'm not worried about what you think or do because I trust your judgment. You're a general officer. I don't even care if you don't read this because you got a lot of things on your plate, and my memo isn't all that important in the grand scheme of things. So even if you don't read it, I will have accomplished my purpose, which is laying out the tribal wisdom that I have for my students and an itemized list of all the things that I've been working on. And then that also serves for my rater and senior rater to be able to write my annual efficiency reports so to see that I'm not at home screwing off. I mean, truth be told, I'm probably putting in 12 to 16 hours a day every day of the last 4 months. I haven't taken a day off. And so when you start writing all that stuff down, there's a lot of things on that list. But I want the students to see what it is that I'm working on. I want my peers to see what it is they can count on me to know something about. So that all gives them a reference list of how I work and what I work on. So if they're interested, then they can sort it out. So this mind map was an attachment to that memo. And another attachment was this idea, which is if you want to get a good classroom dialogue well started, then you have that collection of all your readings and experiences and interests and open questions. That's that same source of notes and that banging around inside your head. All of those things are rich sources of story material that are just waiting to be combined into a dialogue seed. So as an instructor or as a teacher, I try to create a super seed for a 2-hour lesson. So what I do is I go into my experience base, that rich source of raw materials, and I create a dialogue seed, a super seed for each lesson. So each lesson now is going to have a seed package that I build that has all of the embedded ideas, concepts, prompts, examples, and challenges and readings that I want them to be exposed to, so that when we then come into the classroom, this tight package of ideas just waiting to be explored, we've already prepared the ground, that we have all these rich ideas embedded and they come to class already preloaded. And then I give them a super seed, which is this set of central ideas and prompting questions that incorporate history, leadership, strategy, tactics, logistics, and change management, plus all of their experiences. Then this acts like a trigger question, and boom, this will start generating all of the questions and insights that they had from all of their preparation material. And if I structure that into a super seed, when they come in, they are all primed, just ready to go. And we have a lot of very interesting question and answer sessions and back and forth inside the classroom. And we make productive use of the time together on the things that they found to be interesting or most unclear. So there's no wasted time just screwing around in the classroom, showing a slide. What do you think? Nothing. I don't think anything. They come in there loaded up with questions to ask. This is exactly the way that I invite you guys to use the weekend question and answer sessions, the way that we did for the hybrid workshop. I've recorded these hundreds of hours of videos and material and give you a chance to preview them and think your way through it, to put it into practice. Then when you ask me questions in the chat room, or you put together your own flashcard with feedback, that shows me that you have done the work and you asked a really good question. Like Neil asked me a question about that PSAR trailing entry. Well, that is a super seed that then triggers these kinds of high quality presentation and learning lessons. And then that becomes a flashcard and becomes part of the next prep. So these things become additive. The more that you work on these things, the more notes that you take and you put those things together, you will start seeing your ideas come together and you'll start asking very good questions. And then those become the stimulus for what I hope are interesting super seeds that generate good question and answer sessions on these evening podcasts and then on the weekend podcasts and the coffee talks as well. The final thing that I'll say is that once you get all of these mental models, you end up getting a database full of models. And then some environmental trigger happens inside a situational context, and then you try to make sense out of all that stuff. So what we have in this sense-making area is all of the concepts that you have mastered, like your kata or your rule sets, plus some environmental trigger in a situational context. And then you have some kind of criteria, like I gave Neil. It said, how do you know when it was good enough and it's worked and all that other stuff? You have your experience in working with those models, but you bring all that stuff together. Now, Neil is working up a different set of courses of action that will give him solutions that are within his acceptability constraints that he sorted out. And now he can compare different ways that he's going to be able to modify those exit rules. And he'll make a decision on which one of those to use. Now, as you're thinking about your models, you can use your routine models, a trusted recommendation from somebody else. You could, a commercial off the shelf. Hey, I attended a workshop and he gave me a system, so I'm just going to use that. Or you might modify one of these, or you might be inspired with a blank sheet of paper to come up with your own idea. So Neil's idea, in my view, was simply just a modification of some of the things that had come from some trusted ideas in the room. And now he's going to explore and develop his own new particular model. So now he's thinking about, I'm starting now, and I want to eventually take some action to improve that thing. So he's got a plan how to explore that course of action. So I don't want him noodling around. I asked him those leading questions so that he could treat that as a work project on a schedule, because time is precious. So manage your time, do your research, and then have a plan to report it out so you can take some action. That's, in a nutshell, a process of using all of your existing integrated notes and your experiences with these sense-making triggers. That's what that trigger event is, that causes you to pull together all the different concepts that you have. So the reason I make so many of these one-page flashcards is so I can pull together different ideas and build systems or strategies out of these different little modules. Like the no lose plus dinner for two is a module. The 2-hour battle drill is a module. The SSC kata, the PSAR ladder, all of those are modules that can be pulled together to shape a trading system or strategy around some new concept or idea. It's a trusted set of tools that I've experienced working. So that's everything I wanted to say on that coffee talk, Scott, about note taking and note making. And then the larger thing would be something like this database of your models. You want those things to be able to be retrievable and findable. If you're doing it digitally, you got to have findability. So you got to put keywords embedded into your note sheets and then be able to query it so it'll pull all those notes together. Like if you go into Campfire right now and you go up into the search button, you put the words 5DD in there, you're going to see hundreds of references to 5DD case studies. If you type SSC in there, you'd find hundreds of case studies and flashcards dealing with the supported spring crossing. So in one way of looking at it, that Campfire is actually a meta note-taking system that allows us to find what other people have been saying about these themes and concepts that have emerged. So when you label things and embed those, then you can find them in that database of notes so you can pull together concepts. And in that way, you are actually getting some integration and synergy out of all your notes. So Zettelkasten is one of the ways to do it. It's not the only way. Bullet journaling is another way to do it. That modified Cornell note sheet that I use is a way to do it. Tiago Forte and his that little piece of software he's using, he calls it creating a second brain, because you're actually creating, every one of these note sheets is like a neuron, a repository of good ideas. And then these dendrites, these are the little neural connections that link your neurons together in a chain that creates these concepts. So if you look at Tiago Forte, you'll find some inspiring ideas to explore as well. Tiago Forte. Okay. Pretty smart kid. This kid, he's in his 30s. Lots of really good ideas on being organized digitally for the future. All right, that's everything I want to. That was the coffee talk. So now I feel better. I'll go out. I'm going to go do some more work. Take good care, guys. We will see you tomorrow.